The following production is intended for entertainment purposes only. We are not legal professionals. We do not speak for any government agency, and the opinions expressed here are our own. Relax. Closer to us than the big Atman. Like the Atman's, it's literally beyond comprehension. That's how they describe it. Just on this level, if there's a hurricane or a tornado and my house is gone, the relationship with death is much more in the open. Like the Ganges River is constantly filled with dead bodies. The way their relationship with death is like it's a part of life. It is literally it's a part of everyone's life. Reincarnation's a big part of that, but also death itself is a manifestation of God in some ways. You're transcending to the next level, whatever that is. So that their relationship with death is better. Their philosophy, their theology encompasses everything. Like whether they know it or not, whenever they're talking to someone, they acknowledge that there's God in that person they're talking, whether or not they're a follower of the same theology as theirs, as opposed to our old system that if you're not on my team, you're out. Like there is no half in, half out. You can't be lukewarm in this, brother. Theirs is the exact opposite. Like you're in whether you like it or not, homie. God is in you. And it's bigger, it's closer than just the Atman that's in everything. They're like, no, you're actually an incarnation that comes down from a deity. And there is a real deity in you besides that. Like you're wholly on different levels inside you, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. I took a quiz the other day, like a what religion quiz are you? And I was really hoping that it was going to say you're Hindu. But honestly, I don't even know that was, I feel like the quiz wasn't designed for that to be an answer. I'll have to find the link and send it to you. It said that I most closely resembled the New Thought movement. And so I looked it up and it wasn't that exciting. It said that it was Christian Science was kind of affiliated with it. Which that disappointed me because everything I've seen from Christian Science is kind of hokey, in my opinion.
I don't know anything about them. I just remember hearing that they were one of the cults growing up. Like they were one of the folks who called themselves Christians but weren't.
I know that I know there's a lot of Hollywood people, a lot of maybe not entertainment in general, but Hollywood is a big part of it. And
is that the same as Scientology?
I believe so. I could be way off base.
I've heard a lot about Scientology.
In my mind, it's the same thing, but I guess I don't actually know. But you were actually telling me there was something I was running by you, an idea a while back, and you had said that was kind of psycho-cybernetics, which I don't expect you to have read.
Well,
I expect you to say you're going to and then not have actually finished it. But I feel like it was one of the ideas from that you were saying was kind of affiliated with some Scientology stuff. Maybe it was like the healing yourself or...
going clear and stuff like that.
Anyway, but when I got done, I was like, wait a second. Is this website owned by freaking the New Thought movement? And so I was looking around on it. I couldn't find any direct affiliations. But the reason I say that I'm suspicious is because there were 20 questions and none of them, I'm trying to remember what they even were. I felt like it wasn't enough questions to really have a determination,
Yeah, you can't determine anything real in 20 questions.
Yeah, and especially the questions they asked. I do often wonder where I fit, and I think the reason for that is because kind of like I was saying earlier about everybody's got these boxes. It feels good to be in a box because if you're not in this box, then where do you fit in? Where do you belong? Not just in terms of community, but just in general. Like for me, it seems like it would be helpful to know, oh, okay, here's this group of people that think similarly to me. Maybe not completely, but like as opposed to just being out there floating by yourself.
Yeah, a few different things on that. There's definitely a freedom to choose our own path now that the blinders are taken off a very dogmatic theology, and you didn't realize how dogmatic it was until you left. After you're out of that, you lose these blinders, but there's some things that you can't kick. Like not everything actually, I would say most of it can be useful. Well, a lot of it can be useful, but not everything was bad. Now we have the freedom to pick and choose what we want as our spiritual practice. Because one of the things we can't kick is, I think you're here too, is that I still feel like there is a God, and I still feel like I am connected to God, like I have a relationship with God. I actually feel closer than I've ever felt to God. And I still feel like there's things that I can do to be an active member of that relationship. And it's on me to figure out what that is. Yeah, there's a number of things to go down on that. What are you doing?
maybe this is a cop-out, suspicious of my own intentions. And what I mean by that is I still feel like most of the things I was taught in evangelical Christianity are still true in a different way, presentations of something else. They're still good practices. They're still, and that's my path, but not in the sense that everyone else's path is wrong, in the sense that this is the iteration or the version that I've found to be true. Which, and the reason I say it seems a little suspicious is that not just a way of saying, of having your cake and eating it too, kind of like.
Sure. Like, I think I'm right there with you. We're still active. I want to continue going to church for a few different reasons, but the biggest reason is I want my family to have ideally a day, but some time designated for spiritual practice. Like, ideally, I want them to always be in prayer, kind of like how I imagine myself. I think it's good to have some time designated for spirituality. I want you to be part of a group, part of a culture that in some way, and I don't think there is a right or wrong way, or at least not as much as I used to, worshiping God, praising God. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's real important. I want my kids to do that. I want to do that. I want to have time designated for spiritual practice. I want my family to be part of it. And it's comfortable to be part of a group.
Yeah. The hard part, though, especially with our background, is that the exclusivity is so baked into it. It's difficult to encourage your family to engage in these practices or in this, like in the path that you've chosen, but somehow remove bad stuff. Maybe that's not a good way to describe it, but you know what I'm saying? To remove the bits, the parts of it that I think are wrong, because there's really nobody that I can find out there, at least until we start our cult. No, I didn't tell you about that. I've got some ideas to run by you.
Okay.
No, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's not a whole lot of people that are saying that, or that would even support the idea of going to the Christian church and being open to other spiritual practices.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's something you're going to have to protect, especially because we know the rules of the churches that we're going. Because of that, the exclusivity that's baked in there, that one of the big rules is you're on our team or you're not. If my kids ask me, so I have some rules for going to church. I was thinking about this the other day. My top rule is that I'm not going to say anything that I don't think is dangerous. Like, I'm not going to object to anything I hear at church, even if I know it to be false. Like some of the stories or timelines or things like this. I'm not going to tell my kids that that's wrong unless they specifically ask me. If they specifically ask me, I'll tell them the truth, how I understand it, and I'll give them my resources. But yeah, I don't want to do that unless they specifically ask me. Unless there's something that's harmful. And one of the things that I don't tolerate, even though I'm still going to the same church, but I addressed it in my car. Christ died for our sins. No, he didn't. He didn't die for our sins. That's
a big one.
Yeah. I don't want my kids to think that they're so bad that they are doomed for hell unless God murdered his son. That's definitely not my theology. I don't think it's biblically accurate, and it's definitely not a healthy relationship, and it's not the relationship that I want anyone I love to have with God. I'm not going to go out of my way to push that on you unless you share DNA with me, or unless, I love you. So like, we went to church a couple weeks ago and everything was going awesome. Like, he was going over the image of Christ's death and Christ's resurrection. And it's a beautiful love story still, without, at the end, he said, and he did this because you're doomed for hell if God didn't do this. As soon as we got out in the car, I put the car in drive, we got out of the parking lot. I said, kids, there's something I want to tell you. That is not true. It doesn't say that. He added that last part into this chapter in John. He did not say that. That's not part of the Bible. It's not an accurate relationship of God, how I understand him. And of course, their eyes were glazed over. I'm talking to a 7-year-old who's about to be 8, a 6-year-old, and a 17-year-old. My wife is pretty hip. I'm open to my wife about all this stuff. Yeah, the kids' eyes just glaze over whenever I start talking. But I do think it's important to say that.
Our entire life, we've heard about, well, here's why you can trust the Bible, because in this cave, they found this. And 600 years before this happened, this prophecy was written, all this kind of stuff that I, as honestly, up until maybe a few years ago, I would have said that, yeah, this is why I believe. In fact, somewhere on this bookshelf, I probably have an apologetics book that's going to have all of these different facts and proofs and things like that.
You got Mere Christianity on the shelf, I see.
Which is still a good book, but
it's amazing.
Do you push back on that stuff? Like when your kids at some point, they're going to go to a youth group and they're going to come back and tell you, Dad, did you know? And you're going to say, did it?
I don't know. It depends on the situation, and it depends on if I think it's harmful or not. My grandma, who I told you about, had the Buddha statues. She was obviously, that's kind of how I want to approach it. Unless it's the stuff that I think.
Okay.
Unless it's my bugaboos, and there's a list of it. It's more than just that, but that's at the top of it. Christ died for your sins. The God of the Bible is a loving God. I don't think the Bible supports that. And maybe in some ways that it doesn't, but definitely not in the Corinthians 13 definition of love.
Not in the way that it's kind of been mashed together, where we say, well, yeah, that was Old Testament, and New Testament, God of love, and Jesus is his representation. Ignore the stuff about killing the women and children and the slaves and everybody else, because in the Old Testament that's how it was. But I guess the reason I even asked that is because it seems to me that the purpose of giving those facts or those things that prove the truth of the Bible, it's all a matter of enforcing the exclusivity, like. Because this is true, and here's the proof, here are the facts, here's the evidence. Because of that, that's why you've got to believe this, and if you don't, you're going to hell. And I can't really separate those things in my mind. And maybe it's just because that was my perspective back then. This is how I'm going to win arguments, is because of.
I think the answer to that, and this is something I am actively doing with my kids, and I think it's good for everyone to do. Not that I'm have anything figured out, but I'm exposing my kids to people of different faiths and people of different cultures at a real young and early age. And like to the point where these people are in our lives. My neighbor across the street, she came to my kids' school on Grandparents' Day because our grandparents aren't around here. The kids' grandparents aren't around here, and she always gives the kids popsicles and always gives cash. Her son's name is Akash, and so my son's name is Cash, and so she always goes Akash and gives him a big hug and a kiss. Always gives him popsicles. She came to Grandparents' Day, and she's a Ganesh worshiping Hindu, and I want my kids to see that. Like we go over there to her house a lot. And they'll see the statues. I'm like, look, that's Ganesh. Isn't he cool looking? Ask Miss Rachna about him. Ask. And they'll also go to Sunday school on Sunday. Like I want my kids to think. I want these questions to come up. And I don't know. I'm not pretending like I have all the answers. Obviously, I don't. My theology's been turned upside down on its head over the last couple of years, but especially over the last year. I want my kids to have. I think the questions are more important than the theology. What don't you like just giving it enough concern to question it is more important than the dogmatic following of the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I even for a long time, even when I was fully committed to my previous theology, I still thought that it wasn't so much about having the right answers. It was about seeking and finding the truth. And I still think that's right, because I just don't. I mean, we've talked about it before, but to me, it seems like religions across the board we're all looking at this cloud, and we're all seeing different things. And I see an elephant, and you see a giraffe, and this person over here, and even to some degree from different, maybe from a different geographical perspective, you're going to be looking at this thing from a different angle, or based on your experiences. If you've got experiences with something I've never even seen, you're going to say, oh, that looks like this. And I'm going to be like, what are you talking about? That's clearly a giraffe. And I think that's kind of how religions are, is we're all trying to describe what we're seeing, and we're all seeing different things. And I guess the I guess the argument to that would be, well, yeah, but it is one thing. It is a specific thing.
Yeah, something that from the beginning has stated that I'm beyond your comprehension. My ways are above your ways. My thoughts are above your thoughts. These, something that was, I think, might have been maybe different in my church than yours, but I had heard growing up, and I don't remember like the saying for this, but it was perfectly inspired, but written by imperfect men. Like as far as the Bible, they're like, God inspired this Bible, but it was written by imperfect men. That's something I was told as a kid, and I think that might have been a little different than what you were told or your thought.
So did you guys believe in inerrancy?
That wasn't a word that was talked about.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
But I can see that in there, but I never heard that.
Yeah, we used the term inerrancy, and it might actually be scripture, but the phrase was, holy men of God wrote as the Spirit gave them utterance.
Yeah.
Basically meaning that God breathed word for word, punctuation and stuff. But come to find out, the punctuation is different in a whole bunch of different versions, and there's a whole bunch of different words. So if it's inerrant, which one?
Yeah, exactly.
Which version?
It depends on how deep you want to go. If you have to decide at some point, and I think we all do with everything, I'm not going to get down to the root cause and the root understanding of all the subjects in my life. Some things I'm just going to have to drink the Kool-Aid on. Our traffic, our driving patterns, a lot of our cultural things that are just make our society what it is. At some point, I have to just drink the Kool-Aid. I can't fight on everything. I think that's a lot of people's relationship with Sunday or with religion. Like, I'm going to church. It maybe they have some degree of, a lot of them have a degree of relationship, but like, hey, dude, I can't look up the NRSV interpretation and read this scholar's review on it. I'm just going to listen to the preacher, and because I got a 9-to-5 and 3 kids to worry about,
Yeah, get what I can get, take the good, leave the bad. And I guess I would have previously I would have called that a lukewarm or casual Christian or whatever. And I guess I don't have any problem with that these days. That seems like a reasonable option.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I am getting back into, but they're kind of related. So like Buddhism and Stoicism so it's like a combination of, they're two different forms of philosophy, but one of them definitely has a theological field to it. Buddhism has a theological field to it because this talks about spirits and stuff like that. But it is a philosophy more than a theology. And the other one is Stoicism, which I'm just starting to get back into. I was into it before in the past, but I'm just starting to get back into Stoicism, just the ideas of that philosophy and how it helps. Buddhism, definitely meditation. I think we used prayer as this in the past, or we could have. I think I definitely did. A time to lose your thought, like to lose all active thinking, all outside thinking, and to focus on one thing. And we definitely did this in Church of God and Pentecostal denominations, is to lose yourself and to give yourself over to the Spirit. Move as the Spirit moves you. And that is a goal, even though maybe not that fit. Well, it is even in different forms, but that is a goal of meditation, even, is to completely lose your ego and your identity and to give yourself over to the Buddha mind. But they say the Buddha mind is the same as the Christ mind. Like Buddha loves Christ or Buddhism loves Christianity. Give yourself over to the Christ mind or the Buddha mind and to lose your ego. Definitely, that's a meditation thing from Buddhism. And the Stoicism is more just, I think, good principles to live your life by, and things that help you think, be a critical thinker, and things to prioritize what is important to you, and to ask yourself, like in an honest, the Socratic method. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. I don't recall what it is.
Well, so Plato talked about his teacher Socrates, who didn't write much of anything down. But Socrates would go up to all these people in the city in Athens, really take them to task on their own beliefs and their own beliefs and what they thought was like rock solid. We would say theologies, but things like that. And like ask these generals, like, what is courage? Every general would give an answer for what courage is. Like, it's the ability to stare in the face of death, or it's the ability to be honor bound no matter what. He would take him to task, like, does that mean this? And we're like, well, no, it doesn't mean that. It means more like this. Okay, so if it means, and I can't remember, but that was a specific conversation asking generals about what courage. And what he got to was courage means essentially living a good life in everything that was these important archetypal, whatever, foundations of life, courage, love, duty, justice. It all boiled down to living a good life and being honest with yourself. Stoicism has these virtues that help your life and, to be a critical thinker and at least according to the ancient Greeks and Romans, live a smoother life. And it's using the Socratic method, even if they don't specifically lay out the Socratic method. It's getting down to what you really believe. Like with us, it was, do you believe God is a loving God? If you do, and I do, how do you reconcile with this staring you in the face? And eventually you come to a conclusion, and everybody's is different. But mine was that it's not the same person. We're not talking about the same guy.
So when you were talking about the Buddha mind, run that by me again, because that sounds like what I'm doing when I meditate and I give myself to the universe. That sounds like what you were saying. We give ourselves to Christ. It's the same concept. It's the same idea, just maybe a different understanding of what that thing is that you're giving yourself to, or who, or however you want to say it.
It's definitely a different feeling. Having, I think, experienced both of those, I'd had, I don't know what to call them, experiences that were unique just to followers in the Pentecostal church, or to folks that were, that believe the Pentecostal beliefs. I've had those experiences of like losing yourself and losing your mind, giving up control of yourself and giving up control of your mind and your body and your tongue to the Holy Spirit. That is a different feeling than the Buddha mind. I don't know how to say this, but it's the same thing. It's the same. It's like it's the same thing in a different color. Like one in my mind, one is gold, one's pink, or one's red.
Yeah.
In the Buddha mind, and the Hindus would call this the Atman, or the observer. You want to not fight against thoughts, not hold on to the thoughts. Like just observe them and let them pass by, but keep bringing your attention back to something else. Like a lot of times it's the breath, or they'll focus on the front of the head. That's kind of more of a Hindu thing, or that's not a strictly Buddhist thing, but just focusing on the breath, letting the taxes come and go, letting the doctor's appointments come and go. You're building resistance is focusing on the resistance, which is the opposite of goal. You don't want to be focusing on anything except for your breath. And that's to give your ego a timeout, to give yourself a timeout, and to give yourself over to the true observer. That's the person that's present.
I was taught for most of my life that that's actually you're opening the door for Satan.
Right.
If you open your mind, or if you empty your mind, or however you want to say it, that's where he'll get you. That's where he'll sneak in, and you've given him a foothold or given him access, to fill that space.
That's absolutely true. I can attest. That'll get you kicked out of the pearly gates faster than anything. Thinking for yourself and criticizing or looking at theology with a critical mind and opening yourself up to other possibilities that'll get you kicked out of the pearly gates quick in a hurry.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. We talked about interdiction and how that's weirdly related to immigration, and how this was a week or so ago, the Supreme Court said that they put a temporary ban on the powers that the governor of Texas gave to his officers, which was arresting and this is important. I know not everyone will catch this, but I know you will. Arresting based on the suspicion of illegal entry into the United States. He gave his officers, his all state officers, the power to arrest based on the suspicion of illegal entry into the United States. Part of me thinks that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, I think you should maybe kicking it from suspicion to probable cause, or, I think that would be better, but if you can reach probability, then I think they should be, their officer should have the power to detain them and process however, that's above my pay grade, but they should have the power to detain them and to process it. That's part of protecting your place, your community, isn't it?
So well, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that when you look at the rule of law, and if the rule of law was actually designed for justice, then maybe reasonable suspicion could be the standard. I think that for us specifically, because we value freedom so much, that we err on the side of what would you call that? We err on the side of liberty over justice.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I thought was interesting when I was in England, their standard for arrest is reasonable suspicion. They don't have to have probable cause like we would have to have probable cause. What initially came to mind is that for the governor to give his officers that authority, that sounds kind of like a sheriff giving his officers the authority to take someone out. Like, bro, you don't have the authority to do that.
You
can't give me permission to use lethal force.
No.
Absent the standard that the law gives us, right? Like, you don't go above the law. Just like the governor of Texas doesn't have the legal authority. Maybe he should. I'm not saying he should or shouldn't, but I'm saying that he doesn't. And so to give powers of arrest for reasonable suspicion, I'm not sure how that would work. I assume you're going to say that the Supreme Court struck that down.
Yeah, they put a temporary ban on that power. So I think it's going to come up for review, and they're going to examine it more thoroughly. Yeah, but they just put a hold on that power for now.
Now, the interesting question, though, would be, does a non-citizen have Fourth Amendment rights?
Well, see, that's been decided before, and not specifically Fourth Amendment, even though maybe it is Fourth Amendment. But there was a case where an immigrant, I don't think it was undocumented, but it was someone who was not yet a citizen, owned a business in New York. They were sued. Gosh, I used to know this case law because it applied to us based on this specific thing. Anyway, there was a non-citizen that owned a business in New York, and he was sued. And one of the things, there was criminal charges brought against him. And one of the things that they said was that his rights were violated, in this criminal investigation. And the state of New York said he doesn't have rights. He's not a citizen. And that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it wasn't a Fourth Amendment thing, but they said, yeah, this does apply to him. Like, you don't have to be a citizen of the United States to be protected by the Constitution if you're in the United States. I don't know if that was the right decision, but I like it. I like the idea of everyone. Like, I like the idea of natural law. Like, there are some laws that are, and that's the laws that we should have. Like, some laws that are no nonsense. You can't, it boils down to, you can't hurt a person or their property.
Mm-hmm.
That's the foundation, is you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't violate another person's safety or their property or their ability to do whatever they want. I don't know.
I mean, I guess you could boil it down to, as long as it doesn't jeopardize somebody else's pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to give the protections of at least the Bill of Rights to everyone, because the alternative to that would be, if you're in New York City and there's a tour bus, or whatever, that you could just violate like you can just search and detain. Well, that doesn't make sense.
And how are you going to determine that? Show me your papers? Does everyone need to carry around their Social Security card now?
Yeah, but then at the same time, I'd have to think about that, because at the same time, if you're not a citizen I mean, our rights come with responsibilities.
Right.
If you're not part of that social contract, so to speak, if you're not providing anything, should you get those same protections? And by providing anything, I mean, taxes, or I guess mostly just taxes. I don't know. But you're not making an agreement to uphold the law. So should the law protect you as much as it, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then it comes down to, what is a citizen? Well, what does it mean to be a citizen? If you're born here, obviously, but we say people can become citizens even if they're not born here. And I think that's a good thing, because eventually that's all of our ancestors were folks who weren't born here. You want to look at how they became a citizen. They just hopped off a boat and maybe signed a book.
They just, if we go way back, they were just like,
they just committed genocide.
Yeah, this is ours now, and you're going to need to apply for citizenship to this country we just found.
We found it. You happened to be here. You still didn't find it first.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird that you guys were already here. I mean, it's ours, but.
So I was reading today about, there's a tribe in New York that's suing the federal government over their land, and they have a 1794, so it's post-Constitution, post-U.S. Constitution agreement from a general and the governor of New York, saying that they're allowed to have like these 25,000 acres of, that's just them. It's a big hunk of land. It's where Syracuse is, and most of the land around Syracuse is 1794. The government said, all right, this is y'all's. You stay on your side, we'll stay on ours. We're all good. Well, of course, over time, and some of it like within the first 4 years I was reading, that land was chipped away to now they have like an 1,100 acre reservation. And it's on the outside of Syracuse. That's basically it. They don't have any hunting land, or they don't have any of their natural land or ancestral land. And they're suing the federal government and the city of New York over it now. And I guess there's a bunch of these constitutional lawyers that are like, this thing is already dead in its tracks, because the Supreme Court has heard these arguments before and said that the remedy is too destructive to be able to enforce. Maybe they are entitled to this land, but the remedy would be upending these families that have potentially been there for generations and giving it, like, what about the businesses that are there? What about all the homes that are there? Like, the remedy is too destructive. And something that is a New York Times article, but something that it was the son of the chief is the guy who's bringing this suit to the government. Something he said when they answered with that was, it's destructive to who? It was pretty destructive to us back in 1794 when you took away the whole state from us and left us these acres. And it's still been pretty destructive to us ever since then that you've been taking it away from us. So now we have 1,100 acres.
Yep.
We used to own all of the East Coast, or all of this area. I obviously don't have the answer for that, but that is a conversation to have.
Yeah. There was a couple of years ago, I think it was Oklahoma. Somebody had figured out that there were a bunch of deals that we never made good on.
Yeah.
And that, like, they were, I can't remember how it worked exactly, but I think that, like, they were still potentially binding, whatever it had to do with land and, ownership and things like that. I don't remember what came of it. I assume it was the same thing, though, where somebody said, I mean, yeah, it's theirs, but there's no way to fix it now, kind of thing.
Right. I don't know him, but well, I've met him. You know him. There was a guy who used to work at our agency that's now a federal officer, and I met him at a wedding, and he was stationed in Oklahoma, and I talked to him about that there. He said that they agreed, like, yeah, this is Indian land, and I think the remedy was, now the taxes are basically going to go to the tribe. Like, we're not going to force everyone out of their homes and all these businesses out of here. These taxes are now going to go to the tribe. All of the officers and agencies, the local agencies, are now working for the tribe. The thing that pertained to this guy was that all these crimes, like all the crimes ever since this agreement, are now happened on Indian land, which now means they're federal crimes. And so this guy doing horse theft reports and murdering, and stuff from the 1800s and the early 1900s, and all these reports, he was now going back and filing them as federal cases
Oh,
because
wow.
it's all been federal. So like from what he was telling me, is he just spent his entire day at a computer copying and pasting onto federal formats.
Oh, wow. That seems like a tremendous waste of time.
Yeah, of course. Why can't you just say, and these are ours now, and put them in a box?
Yeah, I guess though, going back to, you've got to keep the system afloat, and there must be some kind of,
that is justification for that guy's position.
That's kind of like when I was on light duty years ago, back before I had my neck surgery. I was up in the patrol office. This was back when it was in the main courthouse. I was in the patrol office, and my task was to go through vacation requests from the 80s, the 1980s. We still had paper vacation requests, and to organize them chronologically. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, is this the most important thing I can be doing right now?" And yeah, dude, for like several weeks, I just had boxes of papers, and I was like, March 1987, April 1987, and I was just organizing these things. Essentially, in hindsight, I realized that they were just justifying my job. The alternative was to send me home, which the next time I got hurt is what I opted for. I just said, pay me sick time. I'll use FML, but I'm not going to come to work for the sole purpose of coming to work. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But, all right. Well, hey, we're about an hour and a half, so I guess ready to cut it off?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll edit this part out later.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's all right. You can leave this in there. It was good to see you, man. I'll call you later.
Okay. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, next week we're going to start off on a new conversation. Sorry, the part 2 to this one was a little late. Is what it is. There are things going on. Busy people, busy world. This week's part 2 of the episode was brought to you by Steadfast Real Estate Group of Heritage First Realty in Wichita area of Kansas. Visit them at steadfastict.com or call at 316-461-2806. And that's if you're looking to buy or sell a home in the Wichita area of Kansas. If you're in North Georgia and you need help buying or selling a home, you look up the Harry Norman Realty Group, and the team in that is the Hester Group, or you can visit at claytonblackwood.harrynorman.com or call at 316-409-7907. If you are in the Wichita area and you need a tub painted, call my veteran buddies Jed and Alex of H&L Resurfacing. Call them at 316-209-4674. I'm told they're going to have a real website coming soon. In the meantime, join us next week as we start off a brand new conversation on episode 2. Love you guys. Bye.